Alright, part 2 of Synchronicity Through the Eyes of Science, Myth, and the Trickster by Alan Combs and Mark Holland. Part 2, Synchronicity and Myth. The first function of mythology is to awaken and maintain in the individual a sense of wonder and participation in the mystery of this finely inscrutable universe, whether understood in Michelangelo's way as an effect of the will of an anthropomorphic creature, or in a way of our modern physical sciences and of many of the leading Oriental religious and philosophical systems, as the continuously created dynamic display of an absolutely transcendent yet universally eminent mysterium tremendum et fasciniums, which is the ground at once of the whole spectacle and of oneself. Joseph Campbell, The Way of the Animal Powers, Volume 1. The Golden Beetle, Carl Jung and Synchronicity. To ascribe an intention to chance is a thought which is either the height of absurdity or the depth of profundity, according to the way in which we understand it. Arthur Schopenhauer, I guess it is, on the apparent design and the fate of the individual. Jung and Synchronicity. Paul Kammerer was a fascinating personality, and his first explorations of meaningful coincidences were a shining example of his unorthodox brilliance. Unfortunately, his approach did little to disclose the deeper meaning of the topic. A more intuitive approach was required, and such an approach was provided by Carl Jung. Jung sensed from the beginning that meaningful coincidences were merely the surface effects of a deeper, more holistic reality. He was in Synchronicity He saw in his Synchronicity a clue to a marriage between the essence of human nature and the external world of the physical realm. He used the medieval term unus mundus to refer to this tacit unitary reality, this tacit unitary reality. The one world which must exist behind the poles of spirit and matter. He also found this marriage represented in the Chinese notion of Tao, an unmanifest unity that underlies, organizes, and patterns all that is manifest. Living much of his life during the first half of the century, that'd be last century, Jung was one of the first Europeans to develop an intense interest in Eastern thought, an interest nurtured by his friendship with the great sinologist Richard Wilhelm, the first entirely successful translator of the I Ching, Jung believed that this remarkable book of wisdom and divination derived primarily from the fertile grounds of Taoism, provided, quote, one of the oldest known methods of grasping a situation as a whole and thus placing the details against a cosmic background, unquote. He regarded many, if not all methods of divination as efforts to tap in a controlled way the same processes exhibited in everyday instances of synchronicity. See Appendix 1 for a further discussion of divination. I do want to go back a little bit, because in all truth, I don't recall or remember what synchronicity is. Make sure I'm spelling it right. Not that it's that complicated. So it's referred to as the Chinese field of area of studies or Eastern Asian studies of science and humanities. That's one definition. The study of the Chinese, especially their language, literature, history, and culture. I knew that. I remember once I knew that. Forgot it. Anyways, Jung felt, maybe you forgot it as well, who knows. Jung felt that our connection with this holistic ground of reality occurs at the level of the unconscious mind. Thus, it is not surprising that he regarded meaningful coincidences as symbolic of unconscious activity. As indicated earlier, Jung himself introduced the term synchronicity, and by it he especially meant coincidences which mirrored deep psychological processes. His best known instance of synchronicity, for example, is rich with meaning. This is the now familiar case of the golden beetle, in which a local variety of scarab beetle was heard tapping at his window at the very moment a patient was recounting a dream about its sacred Egyptian relative. Quote, I opened the window, Jung later wrote, and quote, I uncaught the creature in the air as it flew in, end quote. He observed that, quote, scarab is a classic example of the birth symbol, end quote, suggesting the idea of self-transformation and rebirth. This is exactly what Jung's patient was struggling with at the time of her dream, and the appearance of an actual beetle was enough to break her psychological blocks and allow her to move forward in her own transformation. Jung himself experienced many remarkable instances of synchronicity. During one 24-hour period in April 1949, he noted the reoccurrence of the fish theme on no less than 6 separate occasions. He describes this in his book Synchronicity, and a causal connecting principle. Today is Friday. We have fish for lunch. Somebody happens to mention the custom of making April fish for someone. That same morning, I made a note of an inscription which read, Est homo totus midus Pisces ab emo. The inscription contained a figure of a half man and half fish. And that in the afternoon, a former patient of mine whom I had not seen for months showed me some extremely impressive pictures of fish which she had painted In the meantime, in the evening I was shown a piece of embroidery with fish-like sea monsters in it. On the following morning, April 2nd, another patient, whom I had not seen for many years, told me of a dream in which she stood on the shore of a lake and saw a large fish that swam straight towards her and landed at her feet. I was at the time engaged on a study of fish symbols in history. Jung recorded these events while sitting by a lake. Finishing the last sentence, he walked over to the seawall where he saw a dead fish, about a foot long and apparently uninjured, which had not been there the previous evening. If we include this, we have a total of no fewer than 8 fish-related incidences. In the case of the fish, as with the golden beetle, the symbolic richness of this subject is apparent. It is, for example, a symbol of traditionally associated with Christ, or the Roman Catholic Church for that matter, with the birth of a hero, and with the life and instincts of the unconscious. It sometimes appears as a fertility symbol. Jung's own involvement with the fish symbol is evident, as he himself tells us that he was engaged in the study of its meaning and history. It is said that the idea of synchronicity came to Jung in the 1920s during a dinner conversation with Albert Einstein. It seems appropriate that such an idea would result from a conversation between two men who would contribute so greatly to a sense of unity in the cosmos. Jung in the inner realm and Einstein in the outer. As we have seen, however, the notion of meaningful correspondence between casual, unrelated sequences of events goes back much further. Jung himself refers to Schopenhauer as the godfather of his ideas. In the 1850, Schopenhauer wrote an essay on the apparent design and the fate of the individual, dealing with the similitude. Oh fuck! I'm gonna have to do it. Sorry, people. The MS kicked in every time. I swear to God, it drives me nuts. It probably drives you nuts too. That's probably you guys unsubscribe in droves because I suck at this. But you know, it's not what I'm. If you think I'm doing this for a popularity contest, no. I'm doing this to deal with, first and foremost, my MS. Similitude. I can't pronounce it. Don't matter. No matter what I fucking do, I can't pronounce it. Okay. So, sorry for the pause where I... Come on, and then I get to deal with all this crap.
Join us for the Detroit Opera Piano Sale event.
Yeah, but we're not going to do that, buddy.
We are looking at how to pronounce this word. We'll be looking at how to say more confusing vocabulary many get wrong in English. Stay tuned to the channel to learn more. 2 different ways of pronouncing it. In British English, it's generally pronounced as simultaneity. Simultaneity. Simultaneity.
Okay, that's right. Simultaneity. Sorry about that, but I need it for my own psyche. I gotta be able to say the damn word simultaneity, but I can't say this. At least I gotta try. Simultaneity. Now, where the hell was I in all this? Simultaneity. And dealing with the simultaneity of the causal unconnected, which we call chance. Schopenhauer believed that each individual life follows a pre-established pattern or fate. God knows, some of our fates are worse than others. He liked the chain of causality that establishes the path of a single person's life to the meridian of the globe, while the lines of the latitude represent interactions between the lives of separate individuals. The fate of one individual invariably fits the fate of the other, and each is the hero of his own drama while simultaneously figuring in a drama foreign to him. This is something that surpasses our powers of comprehension and can only be conceived as possible by virtue of the most wonderful pre-established harmony. Fate, predeterminism, maybe. Schopenhauer himself no doubt owed a debt to Leibniz, who wrote that the soul was a perpetual living mirror of the universe. This latter notion embraces the alchemical idea that a human soul contains a mirror reflection of the entire cosmos, and miniature, an idea that was in turn related to the medieval notion of sympathies described in the introduction. All such concepts point by implication to the state of unity, a unity familiar to mystical thought throughout the world. And Mahaman's Sabisteri's words, the universe is contained in a mosquito's wing, but if one atom from its place is moved, the universe at once is overturned. Jung was impressed with Einstein's calculations of the staggering amount of energy that lies behind the atom. Indeed, during the first half of the century, the whole world was amazed by this, and particularly by the quantities of energy that could be released by splitting the atom. Jung wondered if there might be a metaphor here for the human psyche, a structure which also enclosed complex and hidden dynamics. Might not it likewise contain vast concealed energies which in the right circumstances could be released? Here we touch the core of the idea of how synchronicity operates psychologically. To go further, we must know more about the nature of the psyche itself as Jung conceived it. The psychological roots of synchronicity. The fact that synchronistic coincidences may express a common form of meaning in both human consciousness and in the physical world, as was the case with the scarab beetle, implies that the origin of such coincidences stands behind both of these realms. This suggests that synchronicity is rooted in the deepest level of mind and our psyche. The unus mundus, Jung referred to this level as the pseudo-psychic or psychoid state, since it is not strictly psychic but partly physical as well. The psychoid state lacks articulation, representing a fusion of both inner and outer reality. In it coexist all past and future possibilities. Out of it comes those exotic processes that Jung is famous for in archetypes. And it's amazing, the synchronicity, how it works. I'm seeing it happening right before my eyes when I was studying this book. The number of things that I've witnessed. That would only be meaningful to me, but one thing I just shared a video about the UFOs and the dead, an interview with Cutchins and what's his face, Bosley, and Bosley interviewing Cutchins, and they're talking about this as well. And this goes along with Cutchins' work. Yeah, it's worth watching that video if nothing else. Ironically, I found it it started with a different video altogether, and yeah, so part of it was to see the nastiness of a Christian by oh God, let's move on. An archetype is the potential for a particular theme or image which lies dormant until triggered by some situation in the environment or in the conscious or unconscious mental life of the individual. Then it resonates like a bell. It's chords heard and felt throughout the personality. Man, my shoulder just burns. Doing this shit it's so painful for me to do this, but I gotta do it. Okay, archetypes can be experienced in oneself or projected onto others. An example is the hero, embodied in figures such as, here we go again, Arthurian knight Sir Lancelot, or the hero of the cowboy movie, or the detective story. When such images touch and excite us, it is because they resonate with this archetype. Archetypes can be projected onto real persons as well, as a photograph is projected onto a screen. In this case, we see thus persons as bigger than life. We can also personally identify with an archetype, becoming in a sense, possessed by it. Jung referred to this as inflation. A person strongly possessed by an archetype seems blown up bigger than life, as if puffed up with hot air. Such persons may actually dream of rising into the atmosphere, unable to keep their feet on the ground. This also could be astral projecting too, and I believe it used to happen to me as a child. And I think it had a lot to do with how oppressive the environment I grew up in was. Another archetype is that the wise old man, the embodiment of deep and ancient wisdom personified in literature and film characters such as Merlin the magician, Gandalf the Grey, or Obi-Wan Kenobi of Star Wars. Each wields a magic power that derives from his mastery of ancient, all but lost knowledge. Other examples of less mysterious and more beneficent wise old men, such as the wise man from the East, touched upon another archetype, that of the God-man, or man-up man, to use Jung's term. This is the ideal of a human embodiment of the essence of the divine. Projecting this image onto someone else is to give that person great emotional power over yourself. This is true. And the best way to go about that is to have somebody that you can't prove ever existed. That is ultimate power. Needless to say, this can be very dangerous unless that person is a remarkably worthy individual. To identify personally with this archetype is a major obstacle in the inner growth, for it virtually guarantees an absences of humanity. Boy, did I watch that last night, with that absentee of humanity, with very brilliant man, a professor at one time, and an author of many books that are thought-provoking, but is a hardcore, extreme Eastern Orthodox Christian who thinks he knows everything about what this world's about, and he is so obnoxiously controlling that I feel like doing a video of that video and to interject and expose the arrogancy of the man that even this common blue-collar dude can see through. I might do it, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe that's part of this synchronicity. It is fine for others to refer to Muhammad Magani as Mahatma, the great soul, but beware of those who confer such titles upon themselves. An archetype may take the shape of a person such as a hero, Sir Lancelot, but at root, archetypes are amorphous and can assume an endless variety of forms. In Chapter 2 of Physics, for instance, we saw that the Great Mother archetype is represented not only in the myriad of figures of earth goddesses, but also in images from nature such as the bear, the rabbit, the cow, the plowed field, the flower. Jung believed that at the center of the psyche, the unus mundus, underlies both the inner world of the psyche and the outer world of the objective reality. Here, in the tradition of Schopenhauer and especially of Leibniz, I don't even have Spanish. I don't know how to pronounce the name. I'm not going to figure it out. Jung viewed the inner world of the psyche as a mirror of the outer world, referring to the deep unconsciousness as a collective living mirror of the universe. At the psychoid level, the outer and the outer worlds are fused in fundamental unity. Thus, archetypical expressions arise from this center, carry not only inner but also universal truth. When we meet such expressions in our own lives, we experience facets of reality that are mythic in scope and significance. Let us examine further the notion of myths and archetypes. We believe, as Jung did, that archetypes are the foundation of myths, which are essentially plots projected out from the unconscious. People commonly use the word myth in a variety of ways. On the most superficial level, a myth simply means a statement that is not true. For instance, it is a myth that men and women enjoy equal employment opportunities. But that's kind of changed. Actually, it's kind of flipped on itself since I've been alive. Women have a greater chance now of getting employed than the men do in the United States, I can tell you that much. On the other level, I'm sorry to say that I'll piss off somebody right there, but that's where my observation is. My personal observation around me. Now, maybe in your neck of the woods, in your part of the United States, it's different, but in my neck of the woods, that ain't the case. On the other level, a myth refers to the imaginative, often romantic narrative, which may express some emotional truth, but is not based on fact. This is often the way we understand the Greek myths. As mythologist and historian William Irvin Thompson points out, myths are on a deeper level are narratives that provide answers to three essential questions. What are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? On this level, myth is synonymous with esoteric religion, as we usually think of it. The story of Christ, for instance, leads many to the life of devout Christian. Here, the question of the historical, factual nature of the myth is not central to the meaning and function. Greek myths were no doubt expressed on these levels by many of the early Greeks themselves. And that's exactly what Christianity is and what Jesus is. It's Greek mythology. That's what it turns out to be. Much of this serious study of mythology occurs at this level. In the Odessa, for example, one might interpret Telemachus' search for his father, Odysseus, Odysseus, as their prototypical search of a young man for his profession, or on larger scale, the Odyssey itself as a journey into the male psyche. Or one might interpret the virgin birth of Christ as witness to his purity. It's definitely contradictory to what the Old Testament says. Yes, I looked to see if there's any prophecy in the Old Testament about a Messiah, a Christ, that would fit Jesus. I couldn't find any. I know it'll piss off people, but I challenge you. In fact, I'm so confident about it, I might even wager a bet with you so I could take your money. These are the essential symbolic interpretations that allow particular stories with all their detail and color to speak to us in our own lives. Interestingly, the unique historical events of the life of an individual, while profoundly important to the development of that life, may at the same time take their form from the template of a much broader truth. Consider Christ, whose individual life takes its form as an expression of the archetype of the divine Son. Joseph Campbell recounts another example of a particular life representing a universal core of meaning in the legend of the Siberian shaman named, Adja. I don't know if that's how you pronounce Adja. We'll go with that. After his death as a young man, Adja was reborn into the spirit world where, following various adventures, he was placed at the topmost level of the great world tree, there to be suckled by a white-winged reindeer. Yeah, well, why not? From this vantage point, he witnessed another shaman's visit to the spirit world to retrieve lost and stolen souls. Eventually, Adja was reborn of a human mother. Campbell notes that 2 points of view must be kept separate in understanding such legends as this: one historical and one symbolic. And the religious life of the tough-minded, too busy, too simply untalented majority of mankind, the historical factor preponderates. The whole search of their experience is in the local public domain and can be historically studied. In the spiritual crisis and realizations of the tender-minded personalities with mystical proclivities, however, it is the non-historical factor that preponderates. For them, the imaginary of the local tradition, no matter how highly developed it may be, is merely a vehicle more or less adequate to render an experience sprung from beyond its reach as an immediate impact, for in the final analysis, the religious experience is psychological and, in the deepest sense, spontaneous. It moves within and is helped or hindered by historical circumstances. Campbell is saying that the mythological experience confronts individuals through the vehicle of historical and local forms or images, yet these experiences have a reality beyond the ancient of a particular form. The death of O.R.D, his ascent into the spirit world and return to the world of the humanity, may have been an actual visionary experience, but it means that one may be transformed by death, nurtured by nature as the spirit, and reborn to humanity. Could have been expressed in many ways. Such mythological experiences are truly archetypical. They express the psychological reality which cannot be denied by reference to a historical level of understanding. Ironically, Western science enters the realm of myth when it tries to answer Thompson's three fundamental questions. In this sense, Freud and Darwin were myth makers as much as Dante and Milton. In a larger sense, the whole attitude of mechanistic science since the time of Galileo, God, I can't say his name again, Descartes and Newton. Hey, I said it right this time. And Newton is mythic. Hey, goddamn, I've struggled with that name for now 50 frickin' years, a half a century, telling us that the cosmos is a vast machine of which the individual is but an insignificant part, and tracing what we meant by myth. However, we find that there is a still deeper level, which is the wellspring of all true mythology. It might be termed the dramaturgical level. Dramaturgical level. I don't know what that word means. Do you know what that word means? I don't know what that word means. So, got another word to learn. I think I know what it means, but I don't really. So, first of all, can I even say the damn word?
Dramaturgical.
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 Dramaturgical, and meaning? Dramaturgical, probably some religious, probably something to do with like related to art or theory of writing or putting on plays, especially of theater. We discussed the musical dramaturgical structure of the opera. Oh, I never heard that word in all my life. That's a guy who's been a musician. And, all right. I've been paying attention about plays and movies for a long time, so that's my excuse. My back is burning. Where the hell was I when I had this? I can't believe I lost my place. In tracing the myths, however, we find that there is a still deeper level, of which is a wellspring of the true mythology, of all true mythology. It might be termed dramaturgical level, because its myths are actual played out in lives of individuals, as if on a stage. The example of Christ's life or Campbell's story of Adadja. Don't know if I'm saying it right. While they may be understood as symbolic only, Also, they may be understood from this point of view. Here, mythic themes become living realities. At the previous level, one emphasized with a myth and perhaps even interpreted it. But at this level, one lives it. For the individual caught up by the power of the archetype, the symbolic meaning of his or her life is no abstraction, but a powerfully felt and utterly convincing reality, which, with or without the individual's conscious participation, directs and forms the nature of the world. In his clinical practice, Freud came across numerous instances of early childhood memories that suggested an intense attraction of children roughly 2 years of age for the parents of the opposite sex. He termed this the Oedipal situation. And I can't believe I can't say that word, and I've heard that. Of course, we all have heard that in our lives. I like it. Oedipus. Oedipal. I guess it's just Oedipal. Oedipal's situation, because it reenacted the essentials of the old Greek myth dramatized in Sophocles' play Oedipus Rex, and in which Oedipus unknowingly marries his own mother after slaying his father. The correspondence between the mythic tale of Oedipus and the situation in early childhood was, in Freud's mind, no accident. The story unfolds a drama proper to the inner psyche. In Jung's terms, we would say that the inner drama is archetypical, projected into an outer world as a myth. While we actually live the myths, we experience them at a dramaturgical level. When we examine our lives for mythological content, we often can see that various aspects of our personalities seem to correspond to different mythological figures. This is an essential notion in Jungian thinking, where mythological personages, most often gods and goddesses, are frequently identified as expressions of archetypes. We will have more to say about this in Chapter 6, but note here that people can easily come under the influence of such mythic or archetypical figures, causing them to behave as if they were living part in a mythical drama. For instance, in a discussion of defensive styles, storyteller Michael Mead observed, you could have, from feminine point of view, a style of self-protection, the boundary keeping of Artemis. Artemis is a virgin goddess, and she stays a virgin for the most part. What virginity means is a style of self-protection, keeping intact. Artemis' style of keeping intact is through communication with nature. For instance, Artemis has the manner of protection of the deer, the way the deer home their territory. Did I say that right? Okay. Quick movements, alertness to things that might be penetrating one's boundaries from any style, like that penetrating. It's very sexual, isn't it? Artemis carries a bow and arrow. Of course, there we go again. When you go too far into the territory, Artemis, into the territory of Artemis, you get hit with an arrow. Some women can do that. I am taking a woman as an example because Artemis is a female figure. You say something to a woman and she turns and hits you with a darting stare. or slapped in the face, and apparently they're allowed to hit us, but we can't hit them back. That's Artemis sending an arrow out, and you get the message right away. Back off. Many such examples could be given to both men and women. Indeed, it seems to be the case that we can discover much about ourselves, the mythic characters we play, the plots we live out daily, by examining our lives in terms of mythological dramas, causal connections. In Jung's thinking, the activation or awakening of an archetype releases a great deal of power analogous to splitting an atom. The atom. This power in the immediate vicinity of the psychoid process from which the archetype takes its origin is the catalyst for the synchronistic event. There is a buildup of energy at this most primitive and undifferentiated level of the personality. Energy overflows, triggering the synchronistic event. The idea is that the activation of an archetype releases patterning forces that can restructure events both in the psyche and in the external world. This restructuring proceeds in a causal fashion, operating outside the law of causality. The power that is released is felt in as a felt as pneumosity, literally a sense of the divine or cosmic. It is described by Jung's student Ira Progoff as a sense of transcendent validity, authenticity, and essentially divinity. Numinosity is described in the Iliad when the old Trojan king Priam secretly crosses the Greek battle lines to plead with Achilles for the return of the body of his dead son Hector. Priam is approached by the god Hermes disguised as a young man. The old man was befuddled and filled with terror. The hair stood up on his subtle limbs. He was rooted to the spot and caught and could not say a word. But the bringer of luck, Hermes, did not wait to be accosted. He went straight up to Priam and took him by the hand. As we have seen, Hermes, who is referred to here as the bringer of luck, was, of all gods, one most identified with synchronicity. We will have much more to say of him, the archetype he represents in Chapter 5. Jung developed his idea to the causal nature of synchronicity in close collaboration with the quantum physicist Wolfgang Pauli. Pauli is famous for predicting the existence of a strange and important subatomic particle, the neutron. In 1930s, 26 years before its existence was actually confirmed in the laboratory. A more fundamental contribution to Pauli is the exclusion principle, which states that no two electrons can occupy any particular orbit within an atom. This principle, though not more than a formal mathematical characteristic of the equations regarding the principle of symmetry, allows quantum physics to make a connection to make connection with most of the pragmatic properties of the real world. This includes the physical basis of chemical bonds and the solidity of matter. Arthur Cloister observed that it is not surprising that the person who discovered the exclusion principle, which acts like a force, although it is not a force, would be one of the first to realize the limitations of conventional science. Indeed, Pauli and Young proposed that the traditional triad of classical physics, space and time, and causality be supplemented by a fourth element, synchronicity. So physics, space, time, and causality supplemented with synchronicity. Producing a tetrad. This fourth element operates in a causal fashion, representing the polar opposite of causality. Pauli and Young drew this polarity at right angles into space and time. See Figure 1 on page 76. Pauli actually believed this causal process to be metaphysical, operating at a more fundamental level than the laws of physical causality. As we have seen, Pauli was no stranger to synchronistic coincidences. He was well known for the Pauli effect, by which delicate scientific instrumentation seemed inevitably to break down in his presence. The term is a humorous takeoff on Pauli's exclusion principle. Pauli's personal life as well was characterized by rich networks of coincidences, particularly during the period of crisis. Then it has synchronicity, and then it has a diagram, and we have what looks like a plus sign or a cross sign. We put plus better. Once again, like everything else in quadrants and things like that. So space, time, causality, synchronicity, north, south, east, west, and on we go. 4 states of physical matter, right? Solid, liquid, gas, plasma. It breaks this triad thing too, you know what I mean? That trinity. Jung and Kammerer. Coincidence rich in symbolic meaning is so characteristic of those reported by Young seem at first glance to contrast sharply with those reported by Kammerer, which typically dealt with rather mundane facts such as the reoccurrence of numbers, letters, and names. Taken together, they could fill a curiosity shop with interesting but apparently meaningless tricks of chance. Young himself was critical of such coincidences, and in most instances did not consider them to be true synchronicity. Young was explicit in limiting his notion of synchronicity to those coincidences that express symbolic or mythic meaning. In the psychological sense, each synchronistic event was thought to involve 2 mental states at once. One was the ordinary state of mind, the product of whatever activities the person was involved in at the moment. The other was the non-ordinary state that results from the activation of an archetype. The latter was truly unconsciousness, but carried with it the feeling of numinosity, or absolute cosmic authority. This feeling was not always overwhelming, but was always present. Kammerer, for his part, must certainly have felt more than a little excitement with the coincidence he reports in his book, Das Gesetz der Surrey. Guess. After all, he kept a log of them for many years, starting at the age of 12. Perhaps we should not be too quick to dismiss these coincidences. The very presence of Kramer's intense fascination strongly suggests the proximity of unconscious activity that may have been more than casual, related to coincidences themselves. Interestingly, Jung considered just such an intense interest and critical to the function of ESP, which he believed to be due in large part to synchronicity. Jung was intrigued by J.B. Rhine's well-known studies of the paranormal conducted at Duke University. Rhine was often successful in demonstrating phenomena such as telepathy, recognition, and telekinesis. Did I say okay. It says precognition. That's okay. Telepathy, precognition, and telekinesis, but was regularly beset with problems in maintaining high levels of performance from his subjects. No matter how well they performed in their initial trials, their performance would gradually deteriorate to the chance level over a period of days, weeks, or months. Rhine was never able to account for this, but Jung's idea was that it had to do with a loss of interest. Most ESP experts are mundane, for example, guessing the outcomes of long successions, perhaps hundreds of coin tosses before they are actually thrown. Under these circumstances, it is difficult not to become bored, lost interest at the time as time goes by. Such a loss of interest reveals a loss of involvement of the psyche as a whole, and thus an increasing failure to engage the deeper levels of unconsciousness. Kammerer eventually experienced no loss of interest or involvement. His intensity seemed to serve as a kind of psychological catalyst for the synchronistic coincidences that he observed. Along the same lines as Alan Vaughan in his book Incredible Coincidence notes that when one becomes interested in synchronicity, meaningful coincidences begin to appear on every street corner. He humorously terms this phenomena as synchronicity of synchronicity, saying that for him, lecturing on synchronicity almost always provokes a few synchronistic episodes. He notes that the synchronicity of synchronicity seems to affect virtually everyone who becomes interested in the topic. And that's true. That's what's happening to me now as well. Hell of a damn. Kammerer, and I realized this before we read this, so how synchronistic. Kammerer was enthusiastic, sincere in the original in his work, but his analytic and statistical approach relegated his findings to the status of merely exotic. Jung's intuitive and holistic approach, on the other hand, stands the test of time and its rich and thought-provoking placement of synchronicity at the core of the meaning of our lives. I take a break because my back is fucking burning. My shoulders are.